An Introduction to Theories of Consciousness. Section 1, The Origin of the Modern Problem. Consciousness can be called the final frontier of modern scientific culture. This is because consciousness is the only obvious problem that has yet to be satisfactorily solved within the modern scientific worldview. Where then should we look for an explanation of the problem of consciousness? Given this lack of success, the modern scientific worldview, what I'm going to call carton world, is clearly not the place to start. Indeed, I believe that it's part of the problem. What I'm suggesting here is that solving the problem of consciousness will involve examining and questioning this predominant scientific paradigm and adopting a radically different alternative worldview. The place to start, however, I would claim, is with the native theory of consciousness, which is universal to our species. This has been called folk psychology, often with a dismissive intent. For people who have never studied or thought very much about the problem of consciousness, they will almost certainly address any such questions using the theory or paradigmatic worldview of folk psychology, because it is our inherited default theory of consciousness. I will later introduce a third worldview, which I'm calling Witten world. This consists of a philosophical reaction to the findings of quantum mechanics and can properly be called an ontology. It was devised by the prominent Cambridge mathematician Alfred North Whitehead, and I believe that it provides an effective theoretical context within which a persuasive solution to the problem of consciousness may be sought. So, what is folk psychology? It consists, in my view, of two components. Firstly, a particular set of psychological outlooks and dispositions which is characteristic of human beings and is believed to have a biological base. This came to be called evolutionary psychology, and it provides a theory of consciousness created by natural selection. Evolutionary psychology has been designed to enable us to function as a eusocial species, i.e., to function efficiently and effectively in groups of between 30 to 150 people. For example, an anthropologist has pointed out that, unlike human beings, 350 chimpanzees couldn't routinely fly in jumbo jets for 7 hours without severely injuring or killing each other. The psychological outlooks and dispositions of evolutionary psychology are what makes this possible for us. These characteristics arise from certain features of human anatomy and neurophysiology. For example, a fixed and universal range of emotions, our capacities for facial recognition and interpretation, mirror neurons, etc. The other half of folk psychology, however, is cultural rather than biological. I'm calling it Ethno Psychology. Again, unlike evolutionary psychology, it differs between cultures. In the Western world, our version of Ethno Psychology can be identified as largely based on Cartesian dualism. Descartes' theory made two major assumptions relating to mind and consciousness. Firstly, it splits the world between a mental and a physical realm. Secondly, it assumed that consciousness has a command and control function within the human organism. Both these assumptions are, I believe, profoundly wrong. Folk psychology's admixture of biological and cultural components causes problems and confusions. For example, the evolutionary part is inbuilt, and we feel it so deeply, we tend to accept the cultural part without question. But over the last 200 years, folk psychology has collided with Cartan world, which is the term I'm using to describe the modern scientific paradigm. This slow but inexorable collision resulted in folk psychology being systematically undermined and eroded. For example, the emergence of classical physics with its concepts of physical closure, chains of causation, etc., left no space for consciousness to exert causal effects. In psychology, the rise of behaviorism led to an emphatic denial of the very existence of mind and consciousness. And in philosophy, logical positivism and identity theory also diminished the notion of consciousness as a significant and independent phenomenon. Given the devastating effects wrought by Cartan world on our folk psychological conception of consciousness, it is apposite to ask, what is Cartan world and where did it come from? As regards its origins, two thinkers in particular contributed its predominant features. One was Isaac Newton with his formulation of classical physics, and the other was René Descartes' philosophy of interactive dualism. As the set of notions which comprise Cartan world, these can be briefly summarized as follows. At the core of this worldview is Newton's vision of the ultimate building blocks of reality as consisting of billiard ball atoms, impenetrable, passive particles activated only by external forces, such as kinetic energy impacts, gravity, momentum, etc. This is an irredeemably materialist, mechanistic, and reductive worldview. Descartes' contribution initially provided an escape for mind and consciousness via his notion of res cogitans, a separate realm exclusively for thinking stuff. However, as scientific culture advanced and religious belief declined, res cogitans was eliminated from Cartan world, leaving only the materialistic, mechanistic, and reductive ontological assumptions of the modern scientific paradigm. These have all now been challenged by advances in physics, especially the advent of quantum mechanics. But due to what I would describe as a failure of ontological nerve, our current scientific culture is still stuck in Cartan world. Consequently, the hard problem is still with us.